We're live. Patrick, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
Good, man. Good. I'd have to say this is the first time I've done a LinkedIn live and someone's been sitting on a couch. So this is
This is my
first time.
current home office. We're all working from home, and
Yeah,
yeah, I have to use my man cave because my wife's actually got the. My wife technically has the office in the house, so
yeah.
she's not giving that up. So I had to convert the man cave. So
we're all
sitting on the
we're all
couch.
changing.
Yeah, at some point in the next whenever the dog who's laying over here will probably come over. So we'll have to.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing I find working from home. I have a greyhound, and usually when I work from home, especially if I have a lot of meetings or a LinkedIn live or whatever, I have to walk him twice in a day. Otherwise, he'll go
Yeah,
nuts,
yeah,
guaranteed.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he'll start running around.
she's got about an hour and a half before dinner, so I think we'll get through.
That's good. That's good, man. Yeah, it's funny. I'm the opposite. I'm in the studio here at Playside, but there's no one here. There's one person working from the office, so it's kind of like the opposite for me. You can go into the office when everything's empty. But it was funny. I drove into the office 2 days ago. Traffic was
Hmm.
as normal as can be, but today
Yeah.
pretty dead here in Melbourne.
Yeah, yeah. It's a whole new world for now. I mean, it's we're all trying to figure it out. I mean, I've been telling people that it feels like 9/11 a little bit, but like sort of on slow motion. You know, but
Yeah, I was talking with another prolific esports LinkedIn guy this morning on WhatsApp, Herb mate.
yeah, okay,
We're having a bit of a chat back and forward, and he was saying the same stuff. I think for me, 9/11 was harder to understand because I think I was in grade 2 or 3 when it happened, so I was quite young. And two, from Australia, so I didn't feel like that exact impacts. But he said
uh-huh.
exactly that same thing this morning as well. So it's interesting that you said that too.
Well, I just remember, I'm a little bit older than you. So I lived in New York at the time, so I
Mm,
I saw the towers, both of them come down. Um, yeah, I mean, it was just there was this sense of uh, right afterwards there was this sense of just people just were lost. They didn't know what to do next, and you
mm,
know, I felt like people came together, and I think that there was like, especially in New York, there was this sort of sense of togetherness, and you get that in New York when things are going wrong. People working together and helping each other out and helping neighbors that you don't
yeah.
normally see in a typical day in New York. But there was still this sort of sense of just what to do, and um, when no one was ready for it, we had to go back to New Jersey, and we waited in line for a ferry for 6 hours. I think my sister and I, and my
Well,
now wife, sat in line for a ferry for 6 hours, and you know, um, people were passing out water, and no one was cutting line. It's really remarkable. But I remember our business. It took our business because that was just music merchandising at the time. Every
mm,
single one of our bands canceled their tours temporarily, just like now. I
mm,
think shorter. The periods will be shorter. I think we were probably back online in maybe a week or 10 days once the flight started again. And I think it will certainly it's going to be
yeah,
longer
okay.
now. But we were just sitting there trying to figure out what to do next, and we're watching our business, and our ecom business is down. It's been down this week since it's really blown up.
Mm,
Um, but talking to the teams, we're in communication with all our teams. We're trying to figure out what the next step is, and how to sort of reboot things and get things back on track. And the one thing that is a constant is everyone's traffic, everyone's web traffic and social media traffic is up by, I think the
mm,
number we're using is sort of on average 30%. So, you're sort of seeing that cause and effect, right? Um,
mm,
and I think specific to esports, we're going to be good. We're going to be good.
mm.
It's okay. Like I said in my article, I published yesterday in ESI. It's okay to see the silver lining in the cloud, and I think we have some opportunities here. We can't ignore the bigger
Mhm.
problem, right? But it'll pass, and we'll get through it, and let's find ways to make the new normal. You know, there was the world, September 11th changed the United States, changed the world. Will this? I'm sure it will, but we'll just find our way through and find new ways to do things. I'm absolutely confident of that.
Yeah, it was yeah, interesting you were saying about, the viewership and this kind of stuff up. I posted a status, I think it was yesterday. I see it almost like investing with, buy the dip and kind of
Hmm.
ride the market. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of the streamers that we work with, their viewership is up. Some people 1.5x. viewers. Obviously, you know, donations are down because people are wanting to save money. They're uncertain. Ad revenue is down across the board. You know, the CEO and founder of Gamers Group, who own Esports and a few other platforms, they posted in my Facebook group saying that, you know, they're down 20 to 30%, I think, on ad revenue, and they're forecasting it to be down 40%. You know, some VCs are saying to them, keep 12-month cash on hand and things like that. But the way that I see it is that, let's say that, you know, you're a Twitch streamer and you go, righto, I was doing it part-time. Well, now I can kind of do it full-time, I guess. I'm working from home, going to invest as much as I can. Yes, I'm going to make less in donations at the moment. Yes, I'm going to make less in ad revenue. But if I can increase my viewership by, say, 50%, and then after the end of all of this saga, 25 to 50% of that 50% leave and don't come back, but I've still got a grown audience. So when the money tap is turned back on, you know, I was sitting along pretty at, you know, 80 concurrent viewers, which you can maybe scrape together a full-time job from. I know some people who can, but maybe after this storm, I'm sitting pretty at 150, 130, which is when you can start talking to sponsors about paying you some cash for your work and, you know, maybe start opening up your own Patreon and give yourself a bit of a step ahead. But obviously it's not for everyone. And I've seen lots of people posting on the entrepreneur subreddit of, you know, 22-year-old companies that are going out of business because they can't operate with 2 weeks with $0 revenue and things like that too. So definitely some people are struggling, but the opportunity, like you said, is really interesting to me. You know, looking at Formula One, you know, going online, the V8 Supercars here in Australia, that's an official supercars league that they've announced that's going to be going online instead of live with real life drivers. You know, I'm talking today to, I don't think I can mention who it is, but I'm talking to another sport today. And even yesterday, I had a great call with the CEO of Truaxis, which is a company that makes an app, kind of very technical game for skateboarding and for surfing, saying, hey, how do we mobilize this? How do we keep people in the market and, you know, keep something happening? Because if all the live events are closing, that money is not just going to disappear. There's still e-commerce going on, like you said, although it might be down a bit. But, you know, if you were going to sponsor Coachella and you had a $2 million marketing budget put aside, what are you doing with that $2 million? Can you reduce it to even $500K and spend it online? Like there's got to be some opportunities. You can't just stop your business entirely.
Well, I mean, you know, again, we're talking about our specific piece of pie and an overall, you know, global situation. I mean, you know, the world is not going to be able to stop for much longer than 30, 60 days, I would assume, right? I mean, and people start going crazy for one. I mean, leave it to a VC to say have 12 months worth of cash on hand. You know what I mean? Like that's a pretty big number. You know, so something's gonna have to break, and you know, you got every government in the world proposing stimulus. I know there's talk about stimulus here, and there's talk about stimulus in Europe, different forms of economic stimulus, and that should here comes the dog. That should you know, that should sort of help people's confidence. I know the market was down again, like super crazy today. I don't know if you probably woke up to that, but it was definitely another big day of down. And but you know, the consumer confidence will bounce back. That stimulus will help. We'll get our e-commerce business back, you know, for sure. Yeah, and you know, and people get their ad revenue back. And to your point, it's you've got this captive audience of maybe whatever X amount more people that are out there to be sort of found or to find you, right, doing what you're doing. And yeah, I think those are the things we have to think about. So
yeah, it's all about that silver lining. But for you, you know, I know this has been covered in many different articles, but I'm sure that a lot of people aren't aware of your history. Can you give just a quick rundown of, you know, who you are and what you've done in the past 20 years in the music and games industry?
Well, I think it's been more than 20, but yeah, I've been doing merchandise, I think, since 1993, and that's because the band that I was in, I was always in bands through high school. I always thought I was going to be a rock star, you know, all that. It was like my sole focus from like 16 on is playing guitar and playing in bands. And you know, sort of fast forward to 1993 when the last band broke up and I didn't have a job and I didn't have a place to live. And we had just come off tour, and we had literally lost, true story, we had literally lost a box of T-shirts, which is like 6 dozen, so 72 shirts. We had lost them. We lost them in Little Rock, Arkansas, actually. I remember where we lost them. And we had to pay for them. It was like $600. So I got a job at the screen printer cleaning screens and just like sweeping the floor or whatever, to pay, like, it was like $10 an hour or something like that. And I kept 6 and they kept 4 until my $600 was paid off. And I mean, I guess I never really left, I just, that job led to another job, and, started working always, so we always took that screen printing and focused it with music. Those are still wanted to do something in music. So just started calling bands that I knew and said, hey, can we make you merchandise? And signed a couple bands up. And one day I got a call about this band called Oasis, which probably heard of, a little young, third grade, maybe it was first grade for you, kindergarten. Maybe. But and we started working with them, and that was probably the first really big band that I worked with, and that led to meeting people and other opportunities. And I just sort of climbed the career ladder, and just have always done that. But fast forward to 2014, I guess it was, is my current business partner, Chris Cornell, and I heard about esports, and we were sort of at a crossroads with our music company where, there's, in the music business, there's always a lot of consolidation, and there was a couple companies looking at us as a potential acquisition. And we went down the road with a couple people and did some due diligence. And at the end of the day, it was really Chris started that company, the merch company. He ultimately decided he didn't want to sell it. And the best answer that we ever come up with is because we're having too much fun, and it works really well for us, So there's no answer past that, really. There's no technical business answer. It's just we want to keep it. And but we're like, we have this sort of entrepreneurial itch. So what are we going to do next? And we got introduced to esports. In retrospect, it's funny. We got introduced to esports through a VC guy. So there you go. But we went to we went to an event. We met a couple teams. And we went to a couple events. And I remember the first big event I went to was ESL One in Cologne. And I'll be the first to admit that. And I was with Chris, my partner. And I'll be the first to admit that it was a beautiful sunny Saturday in Cologne on the river, and nice day. And if you're the first to admit, we almost didn't go because we were having too much fun, on rented bikes going up and down the river. But we started seeing all these kids, just start congregating. We went around to the arena and we saw all these kids congregating around, and we're like, hey, man, these guys and girls are a lot like the kids that come to our concerts. Like, this could be outside of a Panic at the Disco show or a Fall Out Boy show or something. And they're all wearing these really crazy, weird, colorful, sublimated jerseys. I wonder what that's all about. But other than that, they're the same kids that are coming to our shows. So we went in and it was if I remember correctly, I'm not going to remember correctly, but it was one of the Russian teams and maybe a Polish team in the finals. We watched the final match, and CS:GO luckily was something that you can get right away. It's like you can understand how it works, and just pulled in immediately. I mean, there's 15,000 kids there. The production was like any concert production, and it's the pace and the timing and the cadence of the event was like everything we were totally familiar with from the music side, and we're like, it's like an aha moment for us, and that's what started Nations. And we knew that we had the sort of infrastructure, and back room and ability to produce and the ability to distribute around the world. And also for me, it was like almost like the second coming of punk rock. I think that's changing quickly, but at the time it still felt very DIY to me. And, and I was like, I could relate to that. I couldn't quite understand the games, but seeing, especially going, later events like, pre-Call of Duty League, you go to like one of the opens or something like in Las Vegas or something like that. I think that was my second event, and walking around on Thursday or Friday in the open bracket, and you had those 100 teams of kids that were just amateurs, right? And you're watching them get together and get their teams together and whatever it takes to put your team together, practice, and they were getting their jerseys and stuff like that. And that was really another aha moment for me, because it's like, that's what I used to do. I mean, I used to play in bands, and we would book our own shows and put out our own music and all that sort of stuff. And that was just the modern day equivalent. And so that was really relatable to us. And I that was really, you had me. That's when it had me. You know, it was the opportunity to sort of get involved in an emerging cultural and sports and, you know, event again was all it really took. And we started Nations. That's pretty much the story.
Yeah, it's interesting going back to like your start, you know, working at the screen printer. Like, it's a super common question I get asked all the time is, you know, I want a job in esports, where do I start? And usually I say, just pick one thing and stick with it.
Yeah.
You know, people, it seems to be like that. I don't know if they're spoiled for choice or they just don't know where to go to, but, you know, people just don't know where to start. And I think starting sweeping the floors and cleaning screen printers, it gives you access to that industry. Like you said, it allows you to pivot to, you know, gain more agency within the company, to do more work in different ways. And, you know, for me, I started off as a commentator, a freelance commentator, volunteer on an online radio station, and in one game, Battlefield 2. And from there, I said to them, hey guys, you guys aren't in Counter-Strike. Can I do that? And they said, yeah, if you want to do it, you can go and do it. And then I started doing flash game reviews, then started doing some marketing, and that kind of led me, you know, A, B, C, D to help me to land my first job, because I met a company and they liked the marketing work I did for them. So then they wanted to hire me off the back of that. So I think that's a great thing you're saying. And then also a question for you, I guess, was that always your plan to, you know, start off as a screen printing and then move your way up into opening your own business? Like, how did your goals change over time as you went forward?
It's a good question, actually, because you know, it took me, you know, I enjoyed working with the bands. You know, it was easy for me to sort of accept the fact that my playing days were over. That wasn't that hard. And the band broke up, and I never bothered to get another one together. And I was able to throw myself into the merchandise and still, you know, touch what I loved, you know. But I still didn't quite understand, you know, still never quite figured out where it was all going. You know, that took time. I think I just, you know, remember I'm 24 at this point. So that's, you know, that's a very impressionable age. I think I sort of realized I was in it as a lifer probably by 35, when I, you know, started getting senior roles in companies, things like that. And, you know, finding that, we could build this. And, you know, the trajectory of music was helpful too. I mean, again, talk about, you know, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but, you know, again, esports is disruption, right? It's disrupting traditional sports. And right now it's really disrupting traditional sports, you know, and, you know, music got disrupted too. And then suddenly merchandise became like a big moneymaker. I remember when I first started, it was almost an afterthought for a lot of these bands, because they were making so much money off selling CDs, you know, and labels were paying ridiculous advances, and you know, minimum, you know, show guarantees were higher, and like, so merchandise was like, yeah, that's the last deal I'll do. But, you know, it didn't take long, you know, once streaming started and all that, and all the disruption started, that merchandising was a you know, primary earner for a lot of bands. And that was probably the last piece of the puzzle where I'm like going, okay, well, there's never ever have to be ashamed about being like the merch guy anymore. Suddenly we're like, you know, we're like a major component of someone's business. But yeah, I mean, it's just probably the best way to put it is discovering the esports thing was like a blessing almost. It's like, okay, I get to do this again. I mean, I get to be at the forefront of something again. I'll take that. It's great, you know. And you know, given the fact that, you know, if you look at our employees, and this is maybe my favorite part, is, you know, I'm not the smartest guy. Maybe I was never the smartest guy in the room, but I'm definitely not the smartest guy in the room now. I don't know much about gaming per se. What I've picked up, I've learned from my staff. You know, I've got sports guys. My COO comes from traditional sports, and then the rest of my staff is pretty much, you know, sort of endemic gamers. You know, and I'm learning from those guys every single day still. You know, so that's been great too. Keeps you young.
Yeah, something you said before. I wanted to touch on that. You were saying about, it's like esports is like the resurgence of punk rock, or the second coming of punk rock, and it's a really interesting thing I guess like, you know, when esports started breaking into the traditional sports media, like
Mm-hmm.
12 months ago or thereabouts, when sports teams
Mm-hmm.
started running esports teams, a super common question people would ask me is, you know, Chris, what do you think of traditional sports people, fans, and companies that hate on esports, that say it's not a real sport, I don't like it? And I say I don't care, because we're creating our own culture. If we can, you know, like you said with ESL Cologne, if we can put 15,000 kids into a stadium, why should we care about what the local basketball league thinks about us? Why should we care even what the NFL, you know, thinks about us, or a player in the NFL thinks about us? We've created our own industry. You know, I don't worry about what the AFL industry in Australia cares about cars. I'm sure the car industry doesn't care about them that much either. You know, it's a different industry. And I think that sometimes it's hard because esports for so long has been punching up. And I always describe it as like the opposite to virtual reality. I feel like every single tech company has been forcing down the throat of gamers for years. Like, you need to care about VR. VR is important. Whereas esports has been really the opposite. You know, like 8 years ago, being on a StarCraft 2 forum in Southeast Asia, people saying, hey, Christmas is coming up. Go and evangelize esports, basically. You might have an uncle that works high up in Deloitte. Go and tell him what esports is and how cool it is. You might have an auntie that's an executive for Coca-Cola or something like that. You know, go and educate them on what esports is. And so long, esports has been like that unloved child, where it's like, just please care about me, pay attention. We're all here. We're all playing games. There's millions of us. You know, hundreds of thousands of views on videos and this kind of stuff too. But the brands often have just been like, I don't understand, so I don't care. I'm going to go spend more money in rugby or something like that too. But now that payoff is starting to happen, it's interesting to see. And now that a lot of these traditional companies who would have passed it up are now coming into that space, and so many of them are saying the same things as you, is almost like, how did I not discover this earlier? And also, it just makes perfect sense for me to be in here right now. And it makes absolutely no sense for me not to be in here. I guess re-explaining the fact.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I think it's accelerating faster than maybe music did, in terms of, like, if you were to argue that eventually sort of punk rock was made commercial by Green Day, I guess is the sort of, or Nirvana or whatever, is that's sort of the conventional story of how that goes. I mean, that took decades, right? With esports, it's going faster, but, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter. I saw, I think, a tweet today or something from Mike Rufail from Envy, and it was kind of like, oh man, esports is so corporate right now, and you know, my default, you know, the way I read that is like, it's he's being critical, and I sort of scrolled through some of the replies, and you know, I mean, he's saying no, it's mostly good, and I think, you know, I think I agree. I think it's certainly fueling a lot. You know, that involvement is fueling a lot of growth. Will it correct? Will it adjust? Probably, but everything does. It's not an esports thing. That's just a business thing. You know, and that's fine and great, and but, you know, esports still, and will be for a long time, I think, still a place where anyone can come in, and you just basically, you know, your business plan could literally be, you know, better to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? There's still things you can do, and there will be for a long time, to make up new stuff or disrupt or whatever, you know, and that will be, you know, sort of parallel to what's going on in the sort of corporate side, you know. Definitely, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and a question I pre-warned you about last time we chatted, and I talked to Justin Jacobson about this, who's a New York lawyer that represents some music clients as well as esports players, is someone in the past has told me, or a few people have told me, that esports functions more like the music industry than it does like the professional traditional sports industry. Could you explain, like, in your own terms, like, what you think that means, and ways that it may function more like music than it does like traditional sports?
You know, I think your average esports organization, there's probably a couple. I mean, there's probably a lot of them, but the ones that I sort of touch myself on the merch side is the, you know, the average esports organization doesn't necessarily operate solely like a sports franchise. You know, I would still argue that if you're anybody, you know, the New York Giants, Man United, whatever, your primary objective is to be really good at whatever sport you play, right? That's what drives your business. You're a great football team. either American or whatever international. With esports, again, I mean, it's the play, the quality of play is still very important, obviously, but I think the way it was born, and given the fact that a lot of the fans are also players themselves, that lifestyle element has always been part of it. Um, to me, esports is more like surfing and skating than a traditional sport, just simply because so many people that watch the pro teams also play themselves. So how's that tie into the music business? I just think you're selling more of a lifestyle than with your team org than you are with a traditional sport. And I think that is a pretty big touch point when you compare it to sort of music. I mean, it's a sort of an art form, and you're sort of selling a lifestyle and a dream or whatever when you're selling music. That's one way. As far as the business goes, yeah, I don't know if from a business model, I haven't really seen that, to be honest. I honestly see the more successful deals in esports being based on traditional best practice, regardless of where that best practice comes from. So, I am kind of a big fan of franchising. I think it ultimately makes sense. I'm not doing much with it yet because from a standpoint, I agree with it. The way we do our merchandise deals, they're just traditional licenses. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there. It's like, these plug and play merch companies that will charge you 15 and you can charge 30 and keep the 15. Print on demand or whatever. It's like that's really not where we're coming from. We're giving our clients a traditional license with royalties, and we're operating it like we would operate any IP license, and we support it with brand building and marketing and an art department and all that sort of stuff. That's just born from my years of experience in music, and Alex, our COO, comes from sports merchandising, and any merchandising program is like that, and as it's funny because I didn't really work with like a 47 or an outer stuff until we've done esports, and those are like sports merchandisers, and lo and behold, they don't operate much differently than we did, so there's a way to do merch, and that's kind of what we're trying to develop in the sport.
It's funny, like the initial thing for me with my business hat on, the main difference that you guys are doing in the esports industry is when you're a new brand coming into the space, is you're taking some of the risk. So often, so many brands will approach me and say, esports and gaming looks amazing. I'd love to be involved, both feed in, but also I don't want to make any risk. And I need to have a, clear line to make profit in day one. And I want everything for free, and also you as a consultant will pay you in revenue share only, for all your IP and your work and things like that. And I think that's a big difference between what you guys are doing. If you're licensing these people's products, it shows that you believe in them and you believe in their reach and what they can do. Is merchandising yet becoming a significant part of their revenue streams? Like all of the public data says that even up to 95% of most revenue streams from these teams come directly from sponsorship. They don't really get much out of, contrary to public belief, especially a lot of the investors I talk to, they don't make a lot of money off prize pools at all. Most of that goes to the players. And the teams are also taking a lot of risk. I talked to a team owner about this before, Raynad from Tempo Storm, saying that, he's not a believer at all in the traditional esports business model, because you're paying a salary basically to an influencer and they can almost leave at any time, and you're taking a lot of risk on there too. So I'd be interested to get your thoughts.
I would say that we're not there. I mean, merchandise isn't. I think you're right. I think sponsorship is still the bigger number right now. Because we've still got markets. We've still got markets to open up. I mean, if you look at, let's just use music again as the comparison, because I know it best. I mean, our biggest driver is sales at concerts, right? But then you've got a band, a big band like Panic at the Disco, again, for example. It's probably everyone knows it, and one of our clients is, they're doing 30, 40, 50, 60 dates in a cycle, with an average ticket sales of 15,000 or 20,000 or whatever, and you know,
Mm.
that adds up, that adds up. So that's a big part of our drive. And then times that by like the 25 or 30 events that we have touring every year. So that's a big number. On the esports, we don't have that yet, that live event network, so we'll do we last year we did both LCSs, of course, and we're good for 2 or 3 sort of League of Legends, CS:GO majors, say, we've on average we've been doing. And so we just simply don't have the amount of events that we do on the music side. And so that needs to be flushed out. We need to figure that out, because as events increase, we need to get those sales up. And for us, it's whether or not we're just sending product to someone like at Blast, or helping another tournament with their concessions, it doesn't matter. We just gotta figure out a way to sell more merchandise at live events. That'll bring up numbers. And e-commerce is probably growing on par. I mean, but that makes sense, right? I mean, it's just so sort of interlaced with the culture of gaming. And the second thing is retail, or the third thing is retail, and that's really our focus this year, even with this coronavirus stuff, is we think that we're going to open up a bunch of retailers this year.
Okay.
And so whether it's game in Europe, or what's going on here? My Alexa just went off. Sorry.
No worries.
Whether it's like game, or we're talking to in Europe, and Zalando in Europe, or eventually, like, our we want to do something at Lids, which is an American store, or even Dick's Sporting Goods. I think it's eventually going to go there, but we've just got to figure out how to tell those stories, because that's how you sell merchandise in places like that. You have to have a story. You can walk in with an NFL story; it's really easy, right? But the esports story is something that needs to be developed. I need to be able to go into a store and say, this team and this team are bitter rivals, right? They're also the 2 biggest teams in the country. I'm just making this up as a broad thing. You need to these are the 2 you need to pair together to create the story in your account, and just times that by whatever amount of different stories we can tell, and that's really what we're working on. So I think that's what will get merchandise sales up again. But it goes back to best practices, right? This is what traditional sports did. This is what you walk into any sports venue in the world, and there's a pro shop, right? Sports merchandise is everywhere from, like, core sporting goods shops to airport gift shops. I mean, that's all the sort of stuff that we can pull from. I mean, how long does it take to get to that scale? I don't know, but that's the roadmap. That's certainly the basic roadmap we're using.
It was funny, some of the data I remember hearing in the past, and I can't speak for the exact numbers, but it was a traditional sports team that was talking to a friend of mine, comparing average spend per fan on merchandise for Intel Extreme Masters in Sydney, which is I think I sold 11,000 tickets last time, compared to one of their events. And it matches like what you were saying. The spend was much higher per customer, maybe 10x, but there's only one big event, international event in Australia per year anyway. Yeah. So it's like, well, over time they're spending less money, but in one hit, yeah, sure, they're spending more. And it's how do you get more out of it? And my question always is, what's the quality and what's the purpose of the merchandise? Like, is it just if you compare, like, say, band merchandise to sports merchandise, a lot of sports merchandise is just the jersey that they're wearing. When I was a kid, I was a massive cricket fan, so I had a cricket jersey. I bought maybe 2 different years worth of cricket jerseys and such. But I think with esports, a lot of people saw the word streetwear and tried some poorly designed, poor quality kind of streetwear to ride that wave. Or a lot of the time, what you see is an esports team will launch, and then what they'll do the day after they launch is they'll sell merchandise with their logo on it, which doesn't have any meaning or anything behind it too. I'd be interested to see from you, like, what kind of merchandise are your customers looking for?
Well, I think it's a great question. There's sort of two sides to that. One is that we talk about all the time, and I'll take the what kinds of merchandise first, because it goes back to what I said about surf and skate, right? It's esports is an act, it's made up of fans or active participants. So that by default sort of creates this lifestyle. So, there is no, again, going with surfing, there's no Billabong of Manchester United, or even a football, really. But there's Billabong plus 10, 20, 30 others in the world of
Quicksilver, Roxy, never ending.
Right. So, you know, and of course there's a few exceptions to that. So if anyone's out there going, no, what about that brand? I get it. Right. But generally speaking, that's you know, the difference between surfing and a traditional sport. So, I mean, esports is right for that. And I think you've got a time and a place where kids are looking for that stuff anyways. I mean, remember, esports, you know, is sort of peaking around the time that, and I'm no one in my company is allowed to use this word except me, supreme, right? But that's been around for ages, right? And it's now just sort of hitting a certain stride. Anything on anything, you know, on off of Melrose and Fairfax and LA, that whole scene. So there's just all these sort of confluence of different things coming together. So I do think that esports merchandise, you've got this, you know, we like to just use circles. So you've got an inner circle, a medium circle, and an outer circle. And that inner circle is that core fan, you know, that's going to buy everything that their favorite puts out, whether it's the yearly jersey or the hoodie drop or you know, the collab with New Era or whatever we end up doing over time, or Champion or something like that. You're going to buy every one of those pieces because that's what they do. They're, you know, it's part of their life. You know, and you've got that sort of that middle circle fan, which is sort of getting into your sort of traditional sports fan that's going to all the matches, and I guess in this case watching streams or wherever, watching your favorite goes to in time. And you know, they're the sort of quote unquote season ticket holders of esports, if you will, you know. And you know, they're probably you know, if this sort of tracks the way we think it's going to track, those are the ones that are just buying, you know, good quality replica stuff, say, you know, replica on stage wear or the sort of companion hoodie or the hat or whatever. And then that outer circle is the casual fan, which is maybe just buying a t-shirt because they're kind of into so-and-so, you know. Those are pretty standard ways to look at, very simplified, but standard ways to look at how we look at the market. And so far that's kind of what's happening. But that inner circle in esports is in and of itself a billabong, I think, you know, or has the ability to we can have fun with product and in that way, you know, which is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think we talked about this in a call, right? It was that book by Seth Godin, This Is Marketing. You know, I listened to on Audible recently, and I guess that's another crossover with the music industry. You know, he was saying that you can survive with 1,000 super fans. You know, if you're a band and, you know, you've got 1,000 people who will purchase every single gig ticket you go to, you know, you're doing 200-person gigs at, you know, $20, $30 a ticket. They'll purchase every single album that you release. Still, they'll buy the CD and they'll buy the record. And I've seen, you know, some bands are back to releasing cassette tapes for good or for worse. So they might buy that too. You know, they'll buy every single hoodie drop every single year when you do your 1 or 2 tours a year and such and such. And, you know, it's something that works for Twitch streamers in the market. And, you know, maybe something that esports teams, in my opinion, aren't focusing enough on. You know, another thing that he mentions there that resonated with me super strongly, I've probably said this like 20 times in my recent content. So for those of you who have heard me say this, I'm sorry, but it's more so that I think so much in esports, people are focusing on the millionth customer, not on their first 50. You know, my girlfriend is going through getting into powerlifting and losing weight and such, and she's got an Instagram profile that now has over 50 followers. And she's looking to grow. And, you know, saying to her, reach out to some of them. Some of them are messaging you. So reach out to them and say, hey, why do you follow me? What kind of content do you want to see me do? You know, what brought you to here? How did you discover me? Because then you know that most likely the 49th customer is going to have very similar thoughts, feelings, and intentions to the 499th customer, to the 1087th customer. Sure, people will change a little bit, but if you really inherently understand like those first ones, and then you can go from there. Because I see so much esports teams almost see these buzzwords where they go, okay, streetwear. I need to make a long sleeve t-shirt with some writing that goes vertically down the sleeve with my gaming team name on it. Done. Tick that box. I've got streetwear. I'm going to be. And then they also see the word of content. Okay, I've got to make some content. Let's take some selfie videos when we go to the next ESL tournament. But, you know, they're held by a shaky hand and the microphone quality is crap and the lighting looks like my studio does right now, which is not great. And, you know, they go, okay, I've done content. Let's tick that box off. You know, where are all the sponsors? Where are all my fans? Why are they not flocking to me? But I think that, you know, if you look at the motivations for things like FaZe and 100 Thieves and such, you can see there's so much more thought that goes behind it. 100 Thieves doesn't just do a streetwear because of the sake of doing streetwear. FaZe came out of, kids basically playing Xbox, doing stupid stuff and screaming into microphones, 360 no scopes, which is, if you play the game and you want to be good at it, it's the worst thing you could possibly do. But, they have that more core understanding of where things need to go. And maybe, other esports teams need to think a little bit more like that and a bit less like a corporation, which is funny because they're setting the new culture by being here. But I think it's very easy to fall in those traps of, well, hey, Team Liquid's doing it. They got a big valuation. Cloud9's doing it. They got a big valuation. Maybe I should do it too.
Yeah, that's why I like words like disruptive and better to ask for forgiveness and permission. I mean, that's why you do. But you had said something a few minutes ago. And I'm not sure if it's the exact same context, but punch above weight. I like that line too. That's an important point, I think, because you can punch above your weight if you do exactly what you're saying, which is basically, I would say what you're saying to me now is, if I was to have to put it in 4 words, it's like think outside the box, right? It's super important, and we've got teams that doesn't matter if you're a bigger team or a smaller team. If you're thinking outside the box, if you're behaving in a certain way with your, like you're saying, your content and your messaging, and this is going to be an overused word pretty soon, but your brand voice is on point, I always think of FaZe Clan as a great brand voice, and the reason that they are is what you just said, is because it's just some guys that started playing on an Xbox, and that thing evolved into that evolved into what FaZe Clan is now, and they've got an authentic brand voice. I mean, we just did a deal. I mean, most people probably know this, but we just did a deal with Alt. There's a couple brands out there that are sort of bubbling under in terms of the first endemic esports brand, and we wanted to get involved with one because again, we know what we are. We're sort of backroom guys. We're sort of marketers and producers and distributors and planners. We none of us are necessarily that one guy, and really the litmus test for Alt is like Nate, right? Nate's the kind of guy that walks into a room and everyone's like, there's Nate from Alt. That is maybe the most important thing about anyone's brand. You can look at any other brand and there's going to be Bob Hurley, right? Everyone knew who Bob Hurley was. Paul Frank, I used to live in Southern California, so these are guys that are always around. The dude, I forget his name, the guy who started Affliction. These are sort of recent success stories, and that is completely important, and it's also something you just are. I don't know, this sounds sort of corny, but you're born with. I mean, Nate Alt is just that guy. He's that guy. The guys at FaZe Clan just come across as those guys, and that's you've got to have that to Nate shot too, right? So I mean, 100 Thieves is another great example. I think I disagree with you a little bit where you've got those types of brands that will rise above, and whether there's gaming attached to it or not is relevant. But some of the teams, I think they just have to sort of celebrate what they do have, and if you're really good at your gaming, you celebrate that. If you've got some really good content creators, you celebrate that. You got to go with what you got, right? But definitely a way to punch above your weight, no matter what you got. And that is just sort of planning and sort of being aggressive about your product and smarter about your product and staying on trend. And but I think we both are saying the same thing. Is it's like, if you're just going to put out a jersey that has your name on it with a sponsor, no one cares, right? As much as they do when you sort of really have a story behind your product.
Yeah. And like you were saying, brand voice, or also like brand identity and understanding, who you are. And I think, in one of the podcasts with Nicolay, who's got a massive passion, he's made the esports ads. He's doing like a compilation of all ads in esports to help people do better. And he's a real branding guy. And talking to him about, if you were to say, what is FaZe? You would say kind of content creators, streetwear, lifestyle culture. You'd say, what is 100 Thieves? You'd probably say content and streetwear mixed with esports performance. If you were to say Team Liquid and Cloud9, you would probably say traditional sports style, winning at all costs kind of thing. And, I think that part of his challenge was, if you were to go to a general member of the esports public who likes a game that both Team Liquid and Cloud9 participate in and ask them, what's the brand difference between those two teams? Would they be able to tell you that? And understanding that as the company yourself, like you were saying, celebrate what you have. So if you're like, I think a team that does that really well is OG, who previously only had a Dota 2 team and now have a CSGO team, because they know that they're the best in the world about Dota 2 and they know that most of their players are quite introverted, but they're able to make a lot of content around that. They're able to make a lot of content around No Tail, who's kind of their captain and someone been around for many years. And they understand that identity, I think, from who they are. And they try to stay within their lane. They're not signing Fortnite influencers to try to grow themselves. They're not trying to release streetwear because, essentially a lot of them are just really nerdy introverts. It doesn't make any sense for them to wear Yeezys and streetwear and do drops. But, they're staying within their lane and doing what they do really well, which is telling their story, because the players won't tell their own story because they don't want to. A lot of them don't stream, they don't post on Twitter. Arna, who's the Aussie guy, he basically retires after every international tournament. So, they're waiting on, playing to their strengths, basically. So where do you actually, that was the question that I wanted to ask you before. So do you have a formula for what works better for you with the teams that you work with? Is there one or another?
I don't know if you can hear me. We're having a little bit of dropout. Stand by, everybody.
Are we good now?
I hope it's not on my side.
Are we good now? Just checking my internet. We are having a bit of a dropout. Oh, I think I've lost you entirely. Let's see if my internet's still working. Yep, I've lost him entirely. All right, let's try to get him back. Apologies, friends. Let's stick with this for a little bit while we try to get him back online. Send me a message on LinkedIn. Here we go.
Sorry, everybody. I don't know what happened. It's probably my crap.
That's all right.
internet.
We got you back.
Here we are.
I was wondering about that. I saw the video quality slowly degrade over time. It's going back 1 year at a time, and we hit 1998. Off you went.
Yeah. Sorry, but
we're
still here.
Yeah, I was really wanting to know: is there a formula that you find works better for you? Obviously, you've got more access than most into the merchandising of these esports teams, organizations. You've got so many signed. Are there any particular standouts for you? Any teams that function in a certain game, or any teams that have a single gaming team in their organization, or maybe they've got 20, from PUBG to Overwatch? Like, I'm interested.
Yeah, I again, it goes back to what I was saying before. It's like embrace your strengths, right? And the teams that have embraced their strengths have sort of made a list of their assets, if you will, and sort of made a plan to maximize those assets have done well. And that's to be honest, just thinking about no one asked that question, but as I think about the answer is sort of from the hip here, it's like I can say that in our roster we've got big teams and smaller teams in every single game that have been able to do that. So it really comes down to know who you are, right, and we'll help you shape that into a merchandise program. Again, Nations is not a company that is trying to co-brand Nations mark. It's I see us more like a New Era, or again like a 47. It's like, I want you to know who we are because we give you quality merchandise, but these aren't collabs. We're working for our clients. So if you're Team X, we're making Team X merchandise. We're not making Team X Nations collab stuff. Yeah, we have a little tag and all that sort of stuff, but we're working for you. I mean, it's a white label thing.
Is that ego, do you think? I've talked about this a lot in the past, about content, and for me, I find it really hard not to post engagement baiting on LinkedIn. Trying to grow my profile there, seeking those likes. I try to post quality that reaches a smaller audience but actually means things to more people. Do you find that same with brands? Everybody wants their brand to be on the face. Everybody wants to be Gary Vee on the face of content. Do you think that's ego based, and you guys, in your opinion, understand what lane you sit in a bit better than maybe some others do?
I don't know if it's ego based. I just think that probably my guess is that what we do is at the end of the day maybe a little less sexy than starting a brand. Having a brand's cool. I think that's probably the honest answer I can give you. I don't know if it's a question of ego or what. I just think it's a question of expression.
Because I don't necessarily mean like malicious ego, as in someone just wants to be, Elon Musk with 20 million Twitter followers, but I'm also thinking about like the content that Jocko Willink does, ex-Navy SEAL, read a couple of his books, and something that resonated really well with me. A lot of the time when you're having an argument with someone, it's just your ego arguing with theirs, because, both people don't want to be wrong, and both people don't want to be seen as being stupid. And a lot of the time it's, I've tried to focus a lot on that in the past 12 months, is just check your ego and say, you know what, like, it's not worth arguing about this. Like, I'm sorry that, these are the actions, and it could be my fault, and you're explaining why, and that's it. And then you can go and you can move on. I had to do that yesterday, and that was a mistake of my own. And I remember sitting there, I made a mistake in an influencer campaign yesterday that cost me some money. I sent a brief that was slightly wrong. I wasted the time of someone and had to compensate them for their time lost, because they lose revenue when they're not streaming and things like that. And for a while, I sat there looking at my phone going, shit, you have that first thought is almost like, how can I make this not my fault? How can I make this their fault? And in the end, I think that's ego. And I wonder if that's it with brands. Everybody wants to be that biggest brand. Everyone wants to have that public facing, but sometimes, the unsexy things make the most money. There was a comedian that had a great thing that was like, who owns the factory that produces the plastic for those little fish soy sauce packets? How much money are they raking in? Because even in Australia, every time you get soy sauce, it's got little bits of fish, but they're not public. I have a friend who's a property investor who has a $700,000 Lamborghini and like 6 other cars, but his Instagram's on private. He has like 200 followers, which are really his friends and family. And he doesn't go out there and broadcast who he is. He doesn't need to make a podcast. He doesn't need to do all this kind of stuff. And I think maybe that's part of the issue. Once again, like people not wanting to stay in their lane. And I can understand why, because I find it personally really hard as well. It's like, why don't I just start a mainstream podcast instead of an esports and gaming one? Why don't I just post about general business? But for me, like, that's not my passion. My passion isn't, e-commerce and makeup. Really, it's about gaming and esports and influencers within that industry.
Yeah, well, if you're working in your passion and you're expressing your passion and you're making money, I mean, what else could you ask for? Then from there it's scale, and scale can be that's a subjective thing, right? So, I mean, that's the one thing is it's like I do not have a $700,000 Lamborghini and other cars like that guy, but I've always been able to do kind of what I want to do, and so far so good. Can't complain, So, and for anyone getting into esports now, and I'm still not quite comfortable with being the sort of sage old man with advice, but if you get in now and you're doing the equivalent of sweeping floors and cleaning screens, that equivalent in esports, and fast forward 30 years, and if you made a go of it, and who knows, maybe esports is something that launched you into the next thing that's after esports, like music did for me. I mean, you've done pretty good for yourself. Every day is not going to be easy though, and going back to your brand thing is creating a successful brand. I mean, we know that there's two parts to that. There's that brand voice that we were talking about, and that ability to express something that touches people. But there's also sort of a shrewd business side to that. Look, I'll tell you guys a story. If anyone went to PAX in San Antonio 3 years ago, we had this booth. Like, we spent a shit ton, because we can swear, I heard you say it. We spent a shit ton of money on this booth. I don't even remember much, a lot. We were convinced we could walk in and we could make Nations a brand basically overnight. And I think we sold like 5 shirts. And it was like, it's kind of embarrassing. So quietly sold that booth and sort of had a rethink. It's like, well, who do we meet at PAX? Well, we met a bunch of teams that need merch. We met a bunch of colleges that need merch. So we're like, all right, you know what? We're just going to go with what we know, and just that's what we do, and this is what we know, and this is what we're good at. And watching this develop between teams and brands and collabs and people want to get involved is, we think we're finding a pretty good niche where we can operate and sort of be a merchandise Switzerland to a whole bunch of people.
Merchandise Switzerland. So is that what's coming up next for you guys? Is just really that focus on signing more teams, building what you have, and going into that retail? Is that what you see as the future?
Yeah. We want to do that. We want to help. This big explosion in CS:GO this year has been interesting. All those new leagues we've been starting to. I think things are sort of, people have tapped their brakes a little bit, but I would love to be involved in CS:GO events and some of these new leagues and helping them create not only their own merchandise, but really, like we were talking about a little bit ago, like pulling as much money out of these live events as we can. Just for some reason, CS:GO events are just, it's money. It's just always the better, just the better events. I don't know why, but that's been the case so far.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think my answer to that is, if you look at its history, it's been like a trial by fire for the past 20 years or something like that. When people ask me, say, using Australia as a specific example, very similar to America and to Europe, and people asking me what the biggest esport is in Australia, and he would say it's either League of Legends or CS:GO. And League of Legends is almost artificially inflated by the developer, pumping a lot of money in. But CS:GO is all grassroots. Valve spends $0 here. But when I was a player myself, trying to, as a semi-pro, trying to go pro, there was always at least 2 online leagues. At least once a month, there was a Sunday Cup you could play online. Every quarter, there was a LAN party, in every major state that would have a bring your own computer Counter-Strike event. There was a once a year $5,000 Counter-Strike Nationals event that all the best teams would do an online qualifier live finals for, from an internet cafe, like a double elimination bracket. So there was just so much content over that period of time, and that enabled it to build such a strong scene. And I think developers are now paying to get what Counter-Strikers have for free for the past 20 years, where it's always had that community. It's had people like Cybergamer in Australia, ESL across Europe and America, ESEA in America, DreamHack, and these kind of people always, jumping on, that Counter-Strike bandwagon. I think it's that maturity over those years really shows. And I think ESL, I don't think gets enough credit at all. People kind of say, yeah, they're the biggest esports company or whatever, but understanding like where those people came from that worked there and what they've been through for the past 20 years. Or I think like Ralph has said, in his bio, he's been around in esports since 99. Like, that's definitely pre-esports and anything pre-GFC esports is really commendable. And for me, I'm kind of post-GFC era when I started working in that space, but looking at, the Championship Gaming Series in 2007, 2008, that was on DirecTV, played out of a studio, commentators like Fatality, players being paid a $30,000 salary to play in a franchise-style league from teams all over the world. They had London Mint, they had Berlin Alliance, they had Sydney Undergrounds, they had LA Optic, et cetera, et cetera. Jason Lake slapping the back of chairs. I think it's almost like a forgotten era of esports, and there's so much to learn from those days. But I think a lot of, and I guess I kind of half asked this question for you before, and we kind of half answered it, but the average spend per user in esports is extremely low right now, especially when compared to, say, things like NBA. Pay-per-view is not a thing that's really enjoyed. MLG's tried in the past, and maybe something that'll never happen. People don't like paying for content. There's a limited amount of live events that people can attend. So is merchandise, I don't want to say is merchandise the answer, are you the messiah? But obviously you guys see merchandise as one of the answers, of these teams being able to make more money. And I'd love to hear any data that you have that you could share about, growth over time. Are you seeing these teams take their merch more seriously? Are you seeing them see a significant uptick in revenue? If not, when will they?
Well, I can say that our revenue has grown tremendously over the last 3 years. I mean, this is, we sort of call this year I guess this is our 4th official year. And I'm not just talking about sort of on this axis. I'm talking like the clients that we've had for a while. I mean, we're watching their revenues grow. I mean, it's definitely growing. I don't think we have enough of a data set to basically say it's going to go from point to point to point to point. But I would say that as long as we can get some more consistency, I'd like I know I've said this a couple of times, but if there's more consistency with events, that will help. If we can open up some retail and get some sell-through, some key retailers, that'll definitely help. I mean, that's really where I see the growth now, but it's definitely growing for sure.
And I guess is that I guess that's where the franchising comes in for you, right? Because you've got a guaranteed amount of live events, you got a guaranteed amount of home and away games and those kind of things where you can sell things to people that are rocking up live.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the journey too. I mean, you know, at some point, you know, it's the bigger sports in the world are sports that are sort of geolocated, right? I mean, it's like I'm quite sure that most professional sports teams are bigger than even the biggest golfer, Tiger in his prime, or a tennis player, or whatever, you know. And it's why is that? It's like I grew up in Boston. I don't know. I mean, some people listening to this will get this, but you know, I hate the Yankees. I hate them. I don't know why. I have no idea why, other than the fact that my dad probably told me to. You know, everyone around me told me to hate the Yankees, and even I haven't lived in Boston for God knows how many decades. Still, you say the word Yankees, I'm like, ugh. You know. So, does that happen in esports? Does you know, does my son, you know, connect with the team like he's a G2 fan now? Does he connect with G2 and they become a long storied franchise and his kids become G2 fans, or does Nashville get a team at some point in the next 5 years and in one of these games? And who knows? But I think, you know, we're really a story, and it's gonna take a while. Remember, all these other sports have been around for like 100 years or something, you know. So yeah, it's interesting, but there's a lot of, you know, certainly a lot of people trying different things, and that's what makes it exciting.
Hey, you know, in a call we talked a bit about the differences between you guys and Teespring and some influencer stuff. Can we talk about that on the podcast? Is that public?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, you know, we're sort of bespoke, right? You know, we're, again, going back to what we were saying about being a traditional licensing and merchandise company. It's there's not a lot of DIY to our service. It's like our clients bring us on to be their partners in their merchandise. So, you know, most of our teams are using our art department, and we're sort of putting together, you know, graphics packages and you know, and then planning releases. You know, they have input. We sort of tend to put it all together, and then sort of scheduling those releases and getting the stuff produced, and coordinating marketing and putting money into content and things like that. We're you know, a Teespring service is typically a plug and play DIY thing, which works great. You know, it works great for certain projects. I mean, there will be, and our teams that I talk to now, where I'm saying, don't work with us. I mean, it's just you know, you're not quite at the scale for us for what we can do for you to really kick in and have a benefit to you. It might actually be a detriment, because, you know, it's going to cost you money, and you know, and so I think we're just, you know, we're more of a product creation and you know, brand management company than just a plug and play. We don't have any plug and play. I mean,
so
print on demand for us is a tool in our toolbox, as opposed to the point.
Yeah, so I guess the next question for you then is why esports and not influencers or wider gaming, or is that a plan for you guys to get into a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get into influencers a little bit more. We've been talking about how to get in. We're talking to a couple of people doing it, but I mean, the answer is esports, because that's what Chris and I went to go see at ESL. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And you know, like we were talking about last time too, you need a certain amount of scale, obviously, to work with guys like you, but I'm seeing so much success from people that are doing more of this bespoke, limited edition, limited run merchandise. You know, I had an example, and I can't say who it is publicly, but a guy with 175,000 Instagram followers who's making 7 figures basically off selling limited edition hoodies and stuff. And I think he's at 200-ish K now on Instagram. So, you know, someone of that size, you know, I think he's probably making 30% profit or something out of that, you know, per item that's sold. So that's pretty significant. That's more money than a lot of people with that Instagram size will make as a whole from any donations, streaming, you know, ad revenue, sponsorships, whatever. But I think the main point is that it's something special that he's pushing out. There's a narrative behind it. Every single time that there's one that's pushed out, it's got a very nice website that's set up by the manufacturer. You know, the quality of the merchandise is good. It's limited edition, limited run, and sometimes, you know, people will number them as well. You know, there's 1 to 100, so someone will always try to grab that, you know, number 69 and have a laugh about it, or they want number 1 or number 100 or something special. But it's more than just, you know, that, like you're saying, that Teespring thing or the esports team releasing that just shirt with a logo on it where, you know, I had an influencer I liked and I bought one of those, but it lasted 3 washes before it was destroyed. And instead of spending $30 on that shitty quality t-shirt, I would have rather spent $50 on one I could put through 30 washes and have worn for much longer. And and I found personally, you know, I'm a bit stingy when it comes to my stuff. I wear black t-shirts and black jeans, so I don't spend a lot of money on clothes. But you know, I was feeling quite disappointed. I was like, I feel a bit cheated, man. Like I watched this guy's content, I supported him, but now I just get this piece of crap in return for it that I've spent.
It's not. It's you know, I still, you know, and look, I mean, print on demand technology is one of those things that sort of doubles in quality every 6 months, or I don't know if that's true, but you know, that sort of and the analogy is correct, right? And it has its place. You know, we use it a lot on the music side, to be honest, to fill out product lines. If we've got a band with a rich art heritage, for example, you know, that's got 20 records over, you know, a band like, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of them, but yes, you know, they've been around since like 68, 69. They put out a ridiculous amount of records. I mean, doing a print on demand program. So if there's one or 10 or 20 guys that want that t-shirt that's got the 1973 album that I can't even remember the name of. They gotta have that. Print on demand is great, you know, or hot market. If something happens and we want to react to something quickly and get something up overnight, topical hot market stuff, it's great. But you know, going to your influencer thing was doing these by definition, these limited drops have to be really high touch, right? And so, not sure who this influencer is or who they're working with, but really, you know, we fit in, and whoever is working with this influencer fits in, because maybe making merchandise and distributing merchandise isn't this influencer's core competency. Number two is you know, management of time. I mean, we take over a lot of the work there, and really three, you know, spreading out risk. I mean, in a situation like that, we're taking all the financial risk. I mean, we're manufacturing the product and all that sort of stuff. So that's sort of where we fit in as well. So if you take, you know, call it the velvet glove or the high touch or whatever, and you know, that's how we sort of carve out our niche, right? We become a partner.
The way I see a lot of it is high effort, high reward, you know, and that's something that I've been talking to a lot about potential clients working with. You know, I get never ending amount of people that want me to sell things for them at a commission only rate. And, you know, I've tried some of that stuff in the past, but I've said, look, guys, I'd rather do the nation strategy. I really want to get involved with you guys. Like, I want to be able to, you know, be paid for my attention, time, and IP, but also work together towards a KPI based goal that we can actually do together. Because I found in the, you know, in the past that if, you know, it's low effort equals no results, and I waste a little bit of time and they waste a little bit of time, and then nothing gets developed out of it. But let's, you know, actually build some sort of partnership together. And using that in the same vein as we're talking about like Teespring and stuff, you know, a lot of these influencers are selling no shirts a week, 1 shirt a week, because they've got no time to pay attention to something like that. They're like, well, this Teespring shirt makes me $6 profit. And you know, it's not that great quality, and the design's actually pretty old, so I'm not really going to promote it, but it's still there. So I'll tweet about it every now and then. But what if you flipped it the opposite and said, hey, I'm not going to do any merchandise except for, I don't know, once a season, once a year, once a half year. I'm going to do the Smithy Mayo summer package and put some real effort into it, make $30 a margin instead of $6, but make it a very high quality, high touch, you know, proper process. And I think that's something that, for me as a business owner, like, that I've had to come to terms with stop doing so many things. And I think the influencers are coming to that kind of fact too, where they're, you know, wanting to set up proper revenue streams and kind of tick one off as they go, then go on to the next revenue stream and tick that off. And the first revenue stream for them is obviously Twitch or YouTube. But once you've got that ticked, what are you doing next? Yeah. What are you moving on to establish?
It all comes down to establishing best practices. I mean, eventually everything will settle into place, and there'll be this specific set of service providers for this specific service, and this specific set of service providers for this service, and then obviously this set of service providers for merchandise. I mean, it just takes time, but I can tell it's going there. You know, if you've watched another industry sort of be born in the past, I mean, the same things are happening here. So it's you know, I think the future's super bright.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a missed. I guess you would agree it's some sort of missed opportunity, right, for people to be monetizing this merchandise. You know, it hasn't been something, I think, that's had enough attention in the past, and, you know, people love to represent their stuff. And I think like what you're saying as well, it's that culture, what like skating has built its own shoe. There's a skate shoe. And I don't think that's saying that you need to have, hey, these are esports pants, but having that success of 100 Thieves in FaZe, they are pieces of clothing that people want to wear in public.
Yeah.
That people might go to a nightclub and on the way they might be wearing a 100 Thieves spray jacket because it looks cool. And it's not.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's not about plastering logos and like a NASCAR team that's got 400 logos on a jacket or something like that. It's about celebrating that lifestyle and that culture through the expression of what you're wearing.
Yeah, and I would say, and this might be a polarizing comment, but I think that's where you focus now. I don't know. We talk about it all the time. And we're putting time into figuring it out and like talking to people about, like, to your point, true performance wear and say esports jerseys or whatever. Yes, there's some improvements we've been talking about, and we've, especially on the Sector 6 side, we've played with different kinds of fabrics and meshes, as of other people, but I think really the place to be most creative now really is sort of that's using merchandise to express the personality of your team. And let the technical wear catch up. That's my personal opinion. Either people are going to agree with that or they're not, And I'll also say that we're, hedging our bet and looking at the other side. But that's just my personal view, is that there's a lot more room to show expression and build your brands through just, creating really cool stuff that people want to wear out, like you say.
Yeah, and it's those other mainstream influences, I think, coming into that space now too. And one thing that we're pretty much out of time now, but that maybe we can discuss about on the next podcast that we talked about is these sports.
You're gonna invite me back?
Yeah, for sure.
Good, right?
We'll get you back. Maybe you'll be in the office next time instead of quarantining at home. Yeah, no, this is fine. But yeah, it's interesting for me, the pull of esports from traditional audiences. You're seeing never-ending NFL players, NBA players get into the mix. We've talked a little bit about musicians. I think that's a bit of a gap. Not a lot of musicians are getting heavily into it. UFC fighters is a massive one. So many UFC. I did a deal with a light heavyweight in the UFC and EA. There's a bantamweight who's kind of rising through the ranks at the moment, who streams on Twitch, almost every day. And things like that too. So I think that it's great to see, like you're saying, it's that counterculture of esports. It's that punk rock-esque kind of thing that's now pulling in other people from the industry. And then I guess for you guys, it makes sense that you're sitting in the middle of all of that. And like you said, you worked on screen printing, not ever thinking that A, maybe you'd own a company in that space, or B, especially that you would get into esports, which didn't even exist at that time, really. But it's the same with esports. I'm doing a lot of work now with traditional sports people who I never thought that I would have at all.
Well, I think they're good. I think they get it a little bit quicker. I think one of the issues with music is, we talk about integrating music and esports, and we have these conversations all the time just because of people we know. I mean, they're mostly from a label side, right? I mean, we're talking to Warner Brothers or Sony or Universal or whoever about how can they get involved to sell music. And we've been successful in some ways, and I know there's other things going on in that space. What we really need to start talking about is how individual band member who's a good, decent gamer in his or her own right and already has a following, through their music, how we can cross them over. Those are the guys I need to introduce you to. I've got a couple in mind.
Yeah. Oh, sounds good. And it's just, there's so many possibilities, right? Like thinking from the fighter's stance, talking to a boxer. Actually, it's one of the terrible things of coronavirus. This kid's 19-0. And he got his match cancelled 2 days ago on St. Paddy's Day fighting at Madison Square Garden, because it could have progressed him towards a title shot in the future. Well, he'll never say that, it's a possibility. But talking to him, he's saying, like, I only fight 3 times a year, so what do I do for the rest of it? I'm still training every day, but you can only physically train for so long. Similar with a lot of artists, they might go on a tear. They might be like Flume, and they might do 99 shows in a year. Like, I think I watched his 99th show at the Sydney My Music Bowl. But he's likely to have a break after that. So what does he do for 3 months if he's not in the studio? Like, is there some gaming content he can do? And is there a way that he can do it authentically? don't necessarily just all of a sudden start up a Twitch stream and doing daily vlogs about how cool Fortnite is, because your fans are going to be pretty damn confused. But if you can start like working it into what you do and start talking about it in content or on Twitter and on Instagram stories, and then maybe do a meetup and maybe go to an Intel Extreme Masters event and then jump on stream, like that's a great way to start doing it.
Look, I mean, there's a chance that if you're not in esports and you have fans, you're an athlete or a musician or something, your fans are gaming as well. I mean, but you just like you're saying, you got to find that sort of organic way to make that connection, and not just like drop it on them. Like check out the blog about Fortnite. Yeah, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, and I've seen both sides personally, for sure. Working with some Instagrammers and having that access now to that data, which says this many followers realistically means this many concurrent viewers on streams 1 to 5. Stream 1 you might go live with 300, but then by stream 5 you're really sitting at 40. But don't be disheartened, because 40 concurrent viewers is way more than anyone else starts with. Most people start with 0. Hey, the Big Esports podcast, we're on Twitch as well. People are watching us here. Most of our streams get 0 to 3. Like, yes, it's not our main focus, but still, you have to start from somewhere, right? So, yeah. Awesome. Well, I've taken up a lot of your time. We're an hour and 15 in. So
it's fun, man. It's been fun. This is a really good conversation. It's just like it's like a fireside chat without a fire. But you guys see my dog? Hope everyone saw my dog. She's now downstairs. She's now downstairs eating. I don't know if you heard her barking, but
yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to head off later today to go pick up a camera. So hopefully the next podcast we do, I'll have a beautiful Sony A5100 here without these lighting problems, and we'll have an even better second chat. But thanks for coming on, man. It was awesome, and I got to say, I went through a nostalgia trip of listening to Panic at the Disco after we had our meeting.
That's so funny. That's a nostalgia trip for you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like Aerosmith and Led Zeppelin's a nostalgia trip for me. So.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
It's a lot of these bands that we talked about were, my high school memories, I guess.
That's why I'm bringing them up, because I knew there'd be the reaction for you. But all good. I think my mom's watching, or she was. I don't know if she made the tower out, but today would have been the first time ever she's ever heard of Twitch. So
there you go.
If she's watching, hi mom, how's it going?
Fantastic. All right, mate. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and definitely we'll get you on for the next one. And look forward to see where you guys take Nations, what you're doing, and also doing some work together with some music people in the future.
Yeah, let's do something. We'll get reconnected online. Thanks for everyone who's watching, and let's get through this coronavirus thing together and come out the other side and start kicking ass again. Awesome.
So for anyone who wants to follow you online yourself, or wants to follow your companies that you own and you work with, where can they do so?
My Twitter account is @WeAreNationsCEO, and then the company Twitter account is @WeAreNations with the line. What's that called?
Like an underscore or a dash?
Not a dash. The one below the dash, like when you're below it.
Like an underscore?
Nations underscore. I didn't hear you say underscore. Yes, underscore. Yes. Those are our Twitter accounts. Instagram's the same for Nations. And there you go.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, mate. And thanks to everybody who's tuning in live on Twitch, LinkedIn Live, watching the VOD later, or listening to the audio-only podcast. We're doing about 2 of these per week, and we're producing a lot more content now that a lot of people are sitting at home. So if you have any guests you'd like to see, you'd like to come on yourself, feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, which is just linkedin.com/SmithyMayo, or at Twitter @SmithyMayo. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.